Well, welcome to this BC Strategies podcast. My name is Kevin Kieller. I'm one of the BC Strategies experts, and I'm thrilled to have Blair Pleasant and Jon Arnold join me. We were, all three of us, I think it was 2 weeks ago now, we're at Zoom Perspectives 2025. It was my first Zoom Perspective, so I will start giving my first time perspective, and then we'll get Blair and Jon to chime in. So a real thank you to Zoom. I mean, from my perspective, my perspective at Zoom Perspectives, a lot of perspectives, but it was a great opportunity to be able to have deep and sustained conversations with Eric and the leadership team at Zoom. So you could start a conversation in the morning on day one, maybe continue it over lunch, and then into day two, which was less about presentations and more just about small group interactions. And I'm going to focus on, I spent a lot of time in the Microsoft ecosystem. And one of the things that really stood out for me is, Zoom is working very hard to create a very strong integration for larger customers. And I deal with a lot of enterprise customers when I put on my consultant as opposed to my analyst hat. And if these large organizations, they could be a Microsoft shop, but they also use Zoom a lot of times in a business to consumer mode because, quite frankly, consumers are very familiar with Zoom, and Zoom has done a great job delivering capabilities in a simple to understand and adopt way. And, the thing that, struck me is the Zoom and Microsoft integration. So you got Zoom Workplace, you can integrate it. If you're a Microsoft shop, Zoom and Zoom's AI companion, which notably comes for no additional cost. I almost said free. I know the Zoom people don't like to say free, but it comes at no additional cost if you have a paid Zoom license. The Zoom AI companion, it works if you use Outlook and Exchange. And so in Zoom, I can say, summarize my emails. And even though I'm using, Microsoft Exchange email to do that, it can summarize that. It can access my calendar. And quite frankly, this simplicity with AI Companion, it just works. And so Zoom, it has two integrations. The other integration is they will bring Zoom Phone into Teams. And I think that that's exciting. But quite frankly, the thing that I would say, if you're a Microsoft shop, and if you also use Zoom, as many companies do, if you haven't looked at, kind of the Zoom first integration with, Workplace being able to connect and keep your users in Zoom, I thought that was significant. And Zoom is, also bringing out lots and lots of innovations. I think we're going to see a lot of great things at Zoomtopia. But, that was my key takeaway: the accessibility, deep conversations, a great Zoom to Microsoft integration. And with that, I think I'm supposed to pass it over to you, Blair.
Okay, that was nice and short and sweet. Thank you. So I guess I'll talk more on the CX side of things. And Zoom has done, a great job, and they made a lot of progress with Zoom CX. So they're not calling it Zoom CX. It used to be Zoom CX, Zoom Contact Center. So now it's Zoom Customer Experience. So of course, AI and agentic AI is a big part of that, and they seem to be doing pretty well in that area. They've got the AI companion that comes with it. They also have AI Expert Assist, which is a paid option. But one thing that really impressed me was there was a panel with Zoom channel partners, and somebody asked a question about Contact Center, and one of the partners said that when Zoom rolled out Zoom Contact Center, they started positioning it as having about 80% of the capabilities that's needed, but at half the price, because it didn't have all the robust features that some competitors did. But he said, and I'm quoting, "The pace of innovation has blown my mind. Zoom has reached par with all the CCaaS players and still offers disruptive pricing. Zoom can dominate this space and comes up in competitive conversations more than any other vendor." So that really, really impressed me, to hear that from a channel partner saying, how far Zoom has come with their contact center or CX solution. So that was really impressive. And we also saw some really great demos for CX, a lot of agentic AI, and some of them showed, not just, how the AI works or the agentic AI, but that it really does do reasoning and tasks and does things on its own without specifically being told, okay, you need to do this next. It uses that reasoning and it uses the skills that it has to know what to do next and to do those actions on behalf of people. So they've really come a long way. So that was very impressive. And they made a ton of announcements. They talked about the 5 pillars of connected CX, and within those different 5 pillars, they had a ton of announcements, and can't even get into any of them here because there's just not enough time. But I'd say the pace of innovation that they've done with CX is really mind-blowing. It's been really impressive. So the unfortunate part is that because actually all 3 of us, well, Jon and I especially, because we cover CX and the UC or the workplace side of things, we didn't get to do Jon and I didn't get to do the workplace breakout. But what I saw on the Zoom CX side was very impressive. So Jon, over to you.
Yeah, and just got to point right away, folks, if you haven't read Blair's write-up, takeaways, and video interviews about the event, like you said, way too many announcements and features, etc., to cover here. Just check it out because you cover all the ground, and the interviews are great, and just more to consider because there's so much to digest. First thing I'd say is just echoing what you said, Kevin, about coming to an analyst event. And we kind of have a pretty rarefied view of companies that most people don't get to see. You can go to Zoomtopia and be there in a crowd of thousands of people, but there's nothing like getting these demos with only like 3 people in the room and having it all to ourselves. So we get a clearer, cleaner, deeper view of these things than most people will get on a crowded show floor. That's for sure. So that's one of the real benefits, I think, of getting to these analyst events. And like you say, Kevin, obviously the one-on-one time with execs during, before, after the event. So the conversations just keep going, and we get that access. Eric, as a CEO, most CEOs of these big companies, they're not so accessible, but Eric is just right there in the room with everybody. You wouldn't even know him from anybody else if you didn't know who he was. And it's great. I mean, they have a culture there that is very kind of open and not terribly hierarchical. And it shows, because that's what you need to be this innovation machine that they've become. It's a long way from what they talked about during the pandemic of, we make happy. Remember, that was his theme. And he was talking about, there was a,
Meet
early
happy.
on, had they even talked about how a couple did their wedding on Zoom. And he says, that's what we mean by happy. And now look where they are. I mean, it's so much past that. And to make it really relevant to right this minute, guys, I mean, it's just within the last hour, Five9 just announced that Mike Birkeland is resigning and moving on. And you talked earlier, Blair, about Nikki Hall moving on. Think about what could have happened if they had acquired Five9. Turns out that they look, in hindsight, pretty smart, because Five9, I think, is kind of struggling right now, and their next earnings call is going to tell a bigger, probably different story. And Zoom is way past that. Like you say, the innovation that they've added. I think they quoted at the event that 17% of their revs are R&D, and that's even ahead of NICE, which is at 14%. So the kind of money that they're putting into it is really paying off. And because of where they are right now, this is much more than obviously a video story or a collab story. This is workforce transformation stuff, much like what we talked about earlier with NICE positioning themselves higher up on the value chain with the kind of partnerships that they have. This is not a contact center story anymore. And it was nice to see that the conversations there, they talked about having the right to win now, having the swagger back at Zoom. And there was another good quote that I thought was kind of reflected that really well. It was, it'll come back to me. Anyways, but they're in a good position to kind of lead in the marketplace, which is really good. And the last thing, to me, the best part of the story was hearing Nick Tidd talking about their channel strategy, because Now they're becoming much more channel centric in the past, and this is putting them on a path to accelerating the kind of growth that they need, not just to grow the company and fulfill their vision, but also, you know, as a stock market darling, where they were during the pandemic, I'd argue they were the best beneficiary of any vendor from the pandemic in terms of their stock price going up to $300 or something. And it's much, much lower now. But channel is the best way to accelerate the growth and keep the investment community happy that they're doing the right things to deliver on the promise that they've been pushing everything towards. So they've got a great channel story now, and you know, they're hitting on all cylinders, I think, right now.
Yeah, so after, just to kind of wrap up a few things, yeah, Nick did a great job, presented for an hour, totally lots of detail. Like I left saying, here's a professional who has a plan to absolutely, you know, double channel for Zoom, which was fantastic. I have to say, going in, you know, that whole meet happy and be happy, I thought that was a little bit of cliche, but then being there in person and seeing how that is really that simplification, that investment in R&D, which actually, you know, it's complicated to make things simple, and simple makes people happy. And Blair, as you and I talk about, that drives adoption, which is of critical importance. And so what I thought was cliche is actually, you know, stitched through the whole DNA of the organization. And I think that that's why they're delivering. So if you think Zoom is just meetings, if you haven't checked out Zoom Docs and Zoom Workflows and their AI companion and their custom AI companion add-on, I mean, there's lots and lots of depth. And even then, and then the Zoom Contact Center. So, you know, if you think Zoom is just about meetings, because that's what you experienced in the pandemic, please take another look again, because really that's my key perspective coming away from Zoom Perspectives 2025. And with that, I'm going to thank, you know, Jon and Blair. It's great to get BC Strategies experts with the different opinions. And this was a quick recap of Zoom Perspectives 2025.